Welcome to the Legacy Warriors podcast, where we cover the top two feeder leagues to the UFC, whether it's Cage Warriors or, as is the case for this week's card, it's going to be LFA, as they have their 214th event going down this weekend, I believe in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, one of the Dakotas. I don't have my geography just on tap, as I am Canadian at the end of the day, but decent. You know what, actually not the greatest card. A ton of chalk. A fight just got canceled just after weigh-ins completed. I believe there's only 7 pro fights or 8 pro fights now scheduled for this LFA card, and there's chalk everywhere. And it's not even, justifiable chalk, but nor do their underdogs really give them much of a, or give us much of a reason to try to back them and try to cash some underdog tickets as well. So I'll still break down the card for you guys. That's obviously what the Legacy Warriors podcast is all about. Let's get right into it. First matchup up. Lizzie Gevers coming in at minus 450, going up against Nicola Kacperska, who comes in at plus 350. Gevers is a judo black belt, and you saw that on display in her last matchup, which was actually her LFA debut, where she got controlled throughout that first round by Natalia Spies, and then in the second round, she was able to get her judo going, got that head and arm throw, the scarf hold armbar position, and then she eventually forced a tap there. Striking doesn't look too bad, although her striking defense could use some work. Her opponent, Kacperska, 2-2, usually is the one brought in to do the job, just as she was for CFFC and even for BTC, which is a promotion up there in the Toronto area. But she did pull off the upset in her last matchup, even though the opponent she went up against was a 0-2 fighter who came from a Muay Thai background. Kacperska was able to take her to the ground and find that submission shortly thereafter. I think Gevers' judo should bail her out in this spot. I think she is the better striker as well. Kacperska could have some success if she looks to take a takedown heavy approach and actually look to spend some top control time, which she might be able to do, which is why I'm very skeptical about the Gevers minus 450 line, but still not so much to the point that I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the underdog here. So the prediction will be Gevers, but I'd be very skeptical about her at minus 450. All right. Next up, we got Brady Minner coming in at plus 275, going up against Dylan Diebitz, who comes in at minus 375. Now, Brady is actually the brother of former UFC fighter Derek Minner. He's similarly a regional journeyman, 10-6 record, has some long, lanky limbs that usually helps him sink in some submissions, just as he did last time around against a wrestler and Jeff Nielsen. He was able to throw up an arm triangle, just a triangle choke, and he was able to get the tap there. Doesn't really do anything super special. I think the best part of his game is the fact that he has 16 fights of experience fighting all different types of fighters. The guys that have defeated him are recognizable names. Nothing special. Long, lanky, that's usually what's best about him, and then obviously his submission game. He's going up against Diebitz, who had a very difficult LFA debut, going up against a guy in Theo Haig, who's going to be fighting in the Contender Series in the next few weeks here. He managed to get into the second round, pushing Haig further than he's ever been, but Haig was still able to find the submission and force the tap. Now, that's usually Diebitz's game. He likes to take opponents to the ground, utilize his wrestling approach, and smother opponents from that top position. And he's done a great job in terms of pretty much dominating the opponents that he's supposed to go out there and do that against. He's a Pure Vita BJJ product, training alongside Wes Schultz, who's a former Dana White Contender Series alum, also a guy that's going to be competing on the Contender Series again this year. I think he's good enough to kind of stifle the submission game of Minner. I think we'll see Diebitz get that top control, grind this fight out, maybe find a finish eventually. But again, a little bit skeptical about the chalk, considering this will be his toughest opponent that, besides the guys that have beaten him, Jackson McVeigh and Theo Haig. And again, a ton of experience as well compared to the guys that Diebitz has already been defeating. So I'd be skeptical about the minus 375, but not so much to the point that I'm going to take the journeyman. So give me Diebitz and Diebitz inside the distance. All right, squash matchup here where we have Ansar Khamzaev coming in at minus 4,000 going up against Andy Waters, who comes in at plus 1,600. Khamzaev made short work of his last opponent, Abdisalam, in his LFA debut, where he was able to get his back pretty quickly and eventually sink in the choke. He's a slick and aggressive striker, but it's really his jiu-jitsu game that's very aggressive and allowed him to pull off all 3 of his wins by submission very early in those fights. And I don't think that Waters will have anything in return here. Waters has some decent striking, but he is a guy that can be easily taken down and pretty much smashed through, and I'm expecting Khamzaev to do exactly that, but minus 4,000 is just not a playable number. All right, next up, we got Mavliudov coming in at minus 600, going up against Tristan Gwaltney, who comes in at plus 425. Mavliudov, I believe, made a successful LFA debut last time around. Utilizing his BJJ threat. He can be taken down and kind of controlled from that top position, but he has a very sneaky guillotine, and his long, lanky limbs help him achieve that position and eventually force the tap from all of his opponents. He's 10-0 through 5 amateur fights and 5 pro fights. A lot of those wins coming by guillotine. He trains out of the American Top Team branch up there in Portland, alongside Brent Primus, who's obviously a high-level BJJ black belt as well. I just want to see a little bit more activity off of his back. He got controlled in the first round of his last matchup, but eventually found that guillotine and forced the tap. But there's, as he takes steps up in competition, it's going to get harder for him to do so. And Gwaltney is a guy who comes from a kickboxing background, but in the latter half of his career has leaned on a grapple-heavy approach, which actually got him the win back when he competed for LFA last time around. He grinded out his opponent with that wrestling and that top pressure, and he might be able to do that here against Mavliudov if he can avoid that guillotine. But even against guys that are expecting the guillotine to come from Mavliudov, they still get caught in it and they still force the tap. And I'm expecting the same thing to happen here. But at minus 600, it's tough to back a guy that will likely be on the defensive side of things for the majority of this fight until he snatches up that submission. So I just can't justify minus 600 on Mavliudov, even though I'm expecting him to get the win here. All right, next up, we got a pair of UFC veterans coming in here for the LFA, as we have Devin Clark coming in at minus 600, going up against Bevan Lewis, who comes in at plus 425. Now, both these guys, obviously former UFC veterans, but Clark spent way more time than Bevan Lewis did. Clark spent 9 years with the promotion after, I believe, looking for a fight opportunity got him into the UFC. He went 8-9 with the promotion, most recently dropping a decision to Marcin Prachnio, who he was able to crack a few times and hurt badly, but it was the movement and takedown defense of Prachnio that allowed him to chip away at Clark and win that fight on the scorecards. Clark just struggles, right? Like, if he can't get the takedown or if he can't land his big power, he usually ends up coming up on the short end of the stick there. And now he's up at heavyweight, coming off over a 1.5 year layoff. Looks in decent shape, but definitely not the light heavyweight that he used to compete at. Speaking of not being all that in shape, Bevan Lewis, again, another former, I believe, middleweight / light heavyweight, now fighting at heavyweight. The guy just does not look in shape at all. He went 1 and 3 in the UFC, or 1 and 2 in the UFC. Earned his contract back on the Contender Series back in July of 2018. He was 6-0 coming into the UFC, but since then he is now 1 and 6 with his only win coming over Daquan Townsend by decision. He's been finished in 5 of those 6 losses as well, with his most recent loss coming to Julius Walker, who just got signed to the UFC in the last couple of months. Normally showcases a decent striking approach, keeping his opponents at distance, but it seems like he's utilizing this newfound strength / weight to try to overwhelm his opponents in the clinch and the takedown game, but he's just not all that effective in terms of doing it against guys that can showcase good enough resistance. Now, I think Clark is in a little bit better shape and probably has a little bit more path to victory, but at minus 600, you got to question the kind of motivation that is coming from either guy here as well. Kind of leaning on their UFC experience to try to get these regional fights. I think Clark wins. I think Clark grinds them out. I'm seeing a lot of chalk on the under 2.5, but I could see this be a slow burn where Clark just pushes him up against the cage, drags him to the ground, and just controls him from that top position. So if you want to take a little bit of flyer on that plus money over, sure, but not a lot of confidence there. I'm going to go Clark. I just think he's the better wrestler, closer to his prime. But again, even that, neither of these guys are, trustworthy at this stage of their career. All right, next up we got Kubanchibek, Abdisalam Ulu coming in at minus 800, going up against Andre Borges coming in at plus 550. Abdisalam is a very high level prospect, but I don't even know if we can call him a prospect. He's 22-3, currently riding a 14-fight winning streak, won the Brave CF title and defended it 3 times against some very, very difficult opposition, and he was able to, make it look good in pretty much all of those fights. He's a very aggressive striker with some big power in his combinations, but also has the takedown game if he needs to control opponents on the mat. Great cardio to go 25 minutes if he needs to. And again, a wealth of experience against very high-level competition on the regional scene. And I think this guy would be ready to jump right into the UFC if the opportunity presented itself. Now, he's going up against a guy in Andre Borges, who's riding a 5-fight winning streak, making his LFA debut as the current Centurion FC champion, which he won back in February. Has a decent striking approach with his Muay Thai, dropped his last opponent a few times to win that fight, boasts a Contender Series victory over Rodrigo Ligio, and actually has a couple other notable names on his record, but he ended up coming up short against those guys, with Myron Santos and Nick Fiore being some of those notable names. You may or may not have heard Alfred be barking in the background, but that does not mean that the underdog is live in this matchup. I think that Abdisalam will shut down Borges, whether it's with his striking approach or probably a little bit more tepid pace grappling approach. He should be able to keep Borges on his back and grind him out in this spot. I'd be very surprised if Abdisalam fumbled the bag here. So I'm going to go with the Kyrgyzstani fighter to get probably decision victory. Borges is difficult to put away, and I think that Borges will grind him out and win this on the scorecards. All right. The first of 2 title fights for this LFA card, the first of which comes in the middleweight division, as the vacant title, which was formerly held by Azamat Bakoyev, is now contested between 2 LFA newcomers, both boasting a 6-0 record. The first fighter, David Allakhverdiev, coming in at minus 125, going up against Canadian John Moore, who comes in at plus 105. Now, Allakhverdiev faced some very sketchy competition on the regional scene, but he's very aggressive, very athletic, very powerful, very strong, and that has allowed him to go out there and just squash his competition. The combined record of his opponents was 4-9, with only one of them having a record better than 500, but he's gone out there and done what he's needed to do against those guys. Now coming over to North America, you are going to expect him to get challenged, but I think his aggressiveness and just straight up explosivity could allow him to get those first couple wins on the North American soil. At this level, that will definitely take you a long way. He normally looks to take opponents to the ground. He needs to get submissions. He loves the heel hook. He loves to just get that top position and smash down big shots. And even on the feet, he throws with a lot of power and ferocity. His opponent comes out of Calgary, has a 6-0 record, like I said previously, earned a big win for a Vegas-based promotion last time around as he pulled off a knockout in the first round against an 11-6 opponent. Prior to that level of competition, not that great either, but normally showcases a decent all-around game, some good striking, some good power, but nothing really jumps off the page about Moore that makes you want to really, fade Allakhverdiev at very slight plus money. Moore may be the technically superior fighter here, and he might have the slightly better strength of schedule, but I think the explosivity, athleticism, and power of Allakhverdiev will allow him to go out there and land those big shots on Moore, and I think that will allow him to actually get the quick finish here. Again, tough to be truly confident on either side, considering the lack of strength of schedule from either side, especially from the Allakhverdiev side. But I really believe in a lot of the athleticism on the Allakhverdiev side, which should get him the win here. The under 1.5 is at slight plus money, which could, prove fruitful. I think it's at plus money, but either way, I think Allakhverdiev wins. I'd only be comfortable taking up to about minus 150 on him. So at minus 125, I wouldn't mind a shot there. But again, temper your expectations. There's still a lot to be uncovered about both of these fighters. But I think Allakhverdiev will get it done. All right, main event now for the LFA light heavyweight title as former middleweight champion Lucas Fernando goes up to 205 for the first time in his career. He comes in at minus 315 as he goes up against Philip Latu, who comes in at plus 265. Fernando had a very tough 2023 where he lost out on his Contender Series opportunity where he got out-grappled by Cesar Almeida, who is mainly known to be a kickboxer. So that was a very big red flag on the Fernando side of things. And then he went back to LFA to try to defend his middleweight title. Unfortunately, across from him was Azamat Bakoyev, who has obviously been making a big name for himself in the UFC now. Fernando is normally a kickboxer that likes to implement some solid kicks. Doesn't really push the pressure too much in terms of seeking a finish. Does a good job in terms of keeping opponents at bay, utilizing straight shots down the pipe. Like I said, good leg kicks. And that's what you would expect from a Pedro Hizo product. And that's kind of Fernando's style. In recent fights, he's tried to implement some grappling to try to nullify opponents on the mat and really just control fights that way, which has led to a couple boring fights. You know, he's on I believe, a 2-fight winning streak now. So it's kind of surprising to see him go up to 205. But I think a lot of that has to do with trying to just spark some more motivation, try to bring a different wrinkle to his game so maybe the UFC would recognize him once again. He's going up against Philip Latu, who comes from a kickboxing background and had a successful victory last time around against Joe Taylor for the LFA, outstriking a solid striker there, winning that fight on the scorecards. He also had a Contender Series opportunity, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, where he went up against Navajo Sterling, obviously being brought in to make Sterling look good, and Sterling obviously was able to get him out of there. But Latu is a solid kickboxer out of Elevation Fight Team in Colorado, has some good training partners, some good coaches, and he's a decent all-around fighter. He can get the grappling if he has the advantage there, but he's a solid fighter all around. Now, in this matchup, I think it's meant to favor Fernando, hence why he's the minus 315 favorite, but very tough to trust him given his recent form. I'm expecting him to go out there and take a tepid-paced approach, maybe jab Latu from distance, but also know that Latu provides a lot of adverse or resistance in the striking realm. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Fernando actually look to get this to the ground and look to smother Latu from that top position. We've seen some decent work from Latu from the defensive perspective with the grappling, so I wouldn't be surprised to see this fight start to leak into the championship rounds, which is why I don't mind the over 2.5, which is currently sitting at plus money, as I think it will take Fernando probably to the scorecards, and I think that's where he'll end up getting his hand raised. I think he'll get the better top control, get off on the better damage. A lot of his success will likely come in the clinch or on the ground. Again, Latu is no slouch. He will definitely make this line, the money line, look a lot closer than it is, but I just don't have the confidence that he'll be able to stifle that grappling of Fernando. This will be boring, more than likely. This will be a slow-paced fight. Again, the over 2.5 probably the way to go, but I'm going to go with the Brazilian here to be and new LFA light heavyweight champion, Lucas Fernando. All right, there you guys go. Full card breakdown for LFA 214. There are a couple amateur fights, but again, we never get odds for those, so I'm not going to bother breaking it down for you guys. But I believe 7 or 8 fights there for you guys for the LFA 214 card. Yeah, I got the quick picks for the UFC 319 card dropping later this evening. Not to mention, we also got the prop drop and free parlay dropping for you guys tomorrow. Yeah, ton of content on the Lock of the Night page, or on the Lock of the Night YouTube channel. Make sure you guys check it out. I do have 2, maybe 3 plays for LFA posted on the Patreon page. So if you want to check that out, check out the MMA LOTN Patreon page. Otherwise, I'll see you guys again later today for the quick picks version of the UFC 319 breakdown. Peace.